before we get going, I do a lot of these things, and I'm always really keen to make sure that I actually turn up for the whole event. It's sometimes not possible as a speaker, but there are also some speakers that come to these things that seem to dip in and out for their bit, almost grace you with their presence for 20 minutes and then disappear. The reason I like that, by the way, no, I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, but someone has left. No, what I mean by that as well is it's always great to see other people's talk, because there's going to be a golden thread that comes through them, and there is a few golden threads I just wanted to touch on. I made some notes before I came out. The other thing is, as Chris has kind of alluded to, with an accent like mine and a surname like mine, you can see that I've kind of got this sort of split nationality. So I wasn't going to talk about the rugby at the weekend. Tough crowd. But the reason I was going to talk about, I've got a Scottish mother as well, so I mean the Six Nations is just a complete nightmare. As long as the French get me, everyone's happy, right? Yeah. No, I'm only joking. I hate the Italians. But I was in the cab last night, and I was talking to the chap who took me from the airport to the hotel, and I was talking to him about football, and then we got talking about rugby, and I said, oh, you know, it was a bit of a shame. Anyway, so we're going through it, and he was very philosophical about the whole thing and all the rest of it, and then he gave me the receipt for the ticket, for the taxi, and I'm checking it, and then I realised there was some stuff written on the back, and I thought, oh, he's like, put a shopping list or something on the back, and I'm just taking it off him. So I said, oh, sorry, I think you've got something on the back here, and I looked at it, and it's got 4 names and 6 numbers on it. And he says, oh, that was our predictions for the rugby match. So Josh, Frank, Ed and Ad, I won't tell you who they thought was going to win, but they thought it was going to be 42-32, 2017, 18-13 and 27-15. Needless to say, none of them won the sweepstake. But it's funny, it got me thinking, isn't it funny that how your own bias and your own experience shapes what you think is going to be the outcome? You know, clearly that wasn't the outcome, and it's a shame, but it's something that I think we'll touch upon in this kind of sense of bias. The other things that kind of struck me as I was listening to the other speakers, you mentioned about lipstick on a pig, and it instantly took me back to a quote that my old manager used to say, and it's probably not something original, but it certainly was new to me, which is you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. And there's part of me that thinks with this whole debate sometimes maybe we are rolling stuff in glitter. Some of the more serious things that I thought was in there was when we were talking about, and George was mentioning lawnmowers earlier on, my immediate thought when I saw the AI lawn was, I really like cutting the lawn. Like, it's my, you know, like, I'm obsessed with it. You know, it's kind of my moment. I put the headphones in, I go up and down, I go up in straight lines, I have a little way of doing it at the end, I go back in another straight line. So my immediate thought was, oh, that's a shame. I probably won't do that because I'll want to keep mowing my lawn. So, you know, sometimes that comfort that we have in what we've always been doing can sort of seem to blind us to what the opportunities are. The other thing, I touched on professional silos and the idea that we all come up. Chris asked you to put your hands up. You know, who's this professional, who's that professional? We all know when to put our hands up. And it gets me onto my third kind of thing that I've picked up, and again, you touched on it, this idea of identity, which is a really interesting thing. I think we're at the cusp, you know, in the days of being Instagram famous. This idea of identity is becoming really, really obscure, and I think it's trickled and it's tangible within professions. So I want to talk about that, and we'll touch on that as we go through. But as Chris again mentioned just at the end there, I want to talk about chickens. So this guy's not a chicken, by the way. I'm not suggesting at all he looks like a chicken. This is a guy called Seth Godin. Now he's kind of, you know, he can divide opinions sometimes, but because he's kind of seen as this marketing guru, this marketing god. He's literally just published a book called This Is Marketing, which I think is quite a bold thing to do. But he's got a wonderful podcast called Akimbo. And it's something I listen to. It's quite digestible. You know, 20 minutes on the way home, I'll pick up what he's looking at. Now he talks about lots of different things, and he comes at it from different angles. And he was picking up on the idea of memetics, and I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of memetics, which in itself is memetic. But it's this idea that, you know, that people build on thoughts and build on ideas, and they almost have a life of their own. I don't want to talk about that. It wasn't that so much that struck me. It was when he started talking about what came first, the chicken or the egg. Now we've all heard that, and essentially it's a kind of a sort of a general term for causality, and what caused what here. Of course, I was interested because I want to look smug at a dinner party. I want to be able to hit someone with this when I get it. So there is an answer. It's not why I want to tell you it, but the answer is the egg. And the reason it's the egg, I can see a skull of you looking at me going, go on mate, go on, you're going to have to convince me here. The reason it's an egg is because it is true that the first chicken came out of a chicken egg. But the twist is, the first chicken egg was not laid by a chicken. Right? And that's just how evolution works. Mutations happen. The first animal to lay a chicken egg that contained that chicken was the red jungle fowl. That's who mutations work. Now you might look at it and go, hold on Chris, you've just put another picture of two chickens above the chicken egg. That you're trying to tell me it's different. Because on the face of it, these two things kind of look similar. But they're not. In fact, there's a real important fundamental genetic difference between the two. Now, Chris mentioned that my dad, well he didn't say, my dad lives in Cork and he's got 80 chickens. So I kind of feel like I know a little bit about chickens. Here's the key difference between the two. This is the domestic chicken that we're very used to engaging with and going to the petting zoos and doing all that stuff. The red jungle fowl, and I think this is a scientific term, is a little bastard, right? It is horrible. And the whole point here is it couldn't be domesticated. They couldn't put it into agriculture because it just would cause havoc, right? It took so long for it. And for whatever reason, when those two jungle fowl got together and created the first chicken egg containing the first chicken, something in the DNA of this one made it more susceptible to being put into agriculture. So it's a really important but fundamental thing. You can look the same, but actually the reality is you're not. Okay, and that's something I'm going to touch on as we look at professions, because what's really starting this whole thing is when we made an announcement on the 1st of March that we were going to change our name from the British Institute of Facilities Management to the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management. Now, to say that it caused a conversation is somewhat of an understatement. It caused, in some pockets, quite furore. There was a lot of people, not necessarily over here, but there was a lot of people that were very passionate about keeping our B, which it kind of took me by surprise, but given how recent votes in my country have gone, maybe I shouldn't have been. But there was a lot of talk about where the W had come from and why the W was next to the F. How dare it be next to the F? Because workplace is just one of the things facilities managers do. So it caused this whole thing, and it got me really interested, because whilst I'm not a workplace or facilities manager, my job, in essence, in this body and the Chartered Institute of Marketing where I was before, is to observe professions and kind of take a sense of what's going on here. Because where FM, this kind of came, a lot of people kind of think we just decided to change the name. Obviously, there's about 18 months of work that went into this before we made the public declaration, but it was kind of built upon some of the common problems that the facilities management profession has. So in our latest report, it was kind of dubbed the FM's negative feedback loop. So we've got this thing where FM doesn't feel like it's valued, okay? So I think most people in the room can kind of relate to that. People don't know who you are, what you do, and why it's important, whether it's in your personal lives or in your professional lives. So you're not understood or seen as important. Therefore, you lack the resources that you want to do the stuff you want to do. And because you lack those resources, you struggle to act strategically. Now, don't get me started on the word strategic, because I do get a bit hung up about that. But you struggle to do the stuff that will be able to help to demonstrate your value. Therefore, you focus on the essential operational stuff, which is why we see a lot of FMs really go hard on how compliant and how safe we are, because that's the things we can grab onto. And then we struggle to justify our importance, because a lot of people will just see that as hygiene factors, and then we go back around the loop again. And it's been like that since I walked into this bubble in 2014, and talking to many practitioners, it's kind of been ever thus. So we've got this negative feedback loop, so how on earth do we break it? I think one of the things, we've talked a little bit about words today. I have no idea whose glass is who there, by the way. Okay, I reckon it might be that one. Like, no one's got any germs, and any speakers have a cold before they came up. That's not mine, because that's not sparkling. Right, I think words have got a bit of an issue, right? So these are the definitions as published by the various bodies that claim and purport to represent that profession. My issue with this is apart from the fact R1, by the way, and I will do that sort of self-reflection thing, R1 has no grammar in it whatsoever. There is literally not a pause of breath. You need to take a big gulp before you get into it. Because Because we're saying that FM is the organisational function which integrates people, place and process within the built environment with the purpose of improving the quality of life of the people and the productivity of the core business. Now that's not going to pass the most crucial test of any definition, which is the pub test. Could you imagine regurgitating that when you're sat having a pint and someone says, what is it that you do? Well, I'm an FM. What does that mean? Well, it's an organisational function. Yeah, it's just not practical, and that's the problem with definitions. They do kind of have to capture a lot, but they also have to be pithy enough that people remember them. I've got some other issues with it. I really dislike our leaning on this people, place and process. It kind of feels like we've tried to come up with a new way of saying, like, the basics. And then they become like an academic thing and a model, and we make it sound more important because we have that model. I have an issue with the fact that it's focused on the built environment. I think that's holding us back. I think that's locking us in. We're saying it's a built environment discipline. Well, what happens when the built environment changes? And the other thing that really bugs me is where we talk about us as supporting the core business. By simply saying that we support the core business, you are inferring that you are therefore non-core, unimportant, peripheral. So even in the language we've baked into this stuff, we're already positioning ourselves as less important than the people driving the business. So should we be surprised we find ourselves where we are? Now, Fanula, I guess will confirm this, when you don't know what to do, or what something is, or where something is, the first thing we reach for is our phone and we go and consult Google. Because that is the encyclopedia of everything. That's what Google says facilities management is. If you Google facilities management, now that they put the search results actually in the page as opposed to sending you to find the answer, that's what comes up first. The maintenance of an organisation's buildings and equipment. Now I'm yet to meet a facilities manager that agrees with that. Yet that is what other people will look at, because I certainly don't think they're searching our website to find our official definition. So that's the challenge we're up against. Every profession has that though. I don't think we're going to have, unless some of the guys from outside have come in. Have we got any marketers in the room? One, two at the back. Right, I probably know what you're doing at the back. You're colouring stuff in, aren't you? That's all marketers do, right? It's the colouring in department. Yeah, they do adverts and they do fluffy things on websites and things like that, right? We've probably got a couple of these in the room. We've got any salespeople in the room? Wow, lots of you. Yeah, I saw the horses parked outside. The cowboys, right? HR practitioners, we've got CIPD in the room. Is she there? Oh, there's one HR practitioner. You stop us doing things, particularly around Christmas party time. Before you go and have fun, here's 10 reasons why you can't have fun. Right? And then IT practitioners, IT departments. One very scared person in the back going, I'm working IT, please don't pick on me. Will you stop more stuff? Can I go here? Can I download this? No. It will help my job, but it will risk security. So every profession has it, but my kind of thing is we can sit here and laugh at other professions, but what's happening at the marketing conference when they put this up on the screen? What is it that they all think we're doing? We know, part of my dash back before I had to get up and speak, I was going to say, sorry, excuse me, I was using the facilities. And people in the profession hate that. They hate that we keep talking about it and perpetuating that thing, but the reality is, it's the only time in the English language, other than when we're talking about this profession, that F word gets used. We've got a real framing problem here. But this word has grown in recognition. Now, I'm not going to sit here and I'll show you why in a second. This isn't new. People told us when we put this word in, this is just the latest fad, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think workplaces have only just started existing. What I think has happened is that organisations have only just started paying any attention to it. Okay, that's the new bit. But actually, workplaces have always been there. But like Neil showed you earlier on with his photo, they just used to be a little bit shit. And there's actually companies like Fanulas that have said to everyone, do you know what, they don't have to be anymore. They can actually be really nice places to go, something that Neil talks about in his book. So what is a workplace? Well, this is what Google thinks. A place where people work, such as an office or a factory. It immediately already feels a bit lighter and a bit more digestible, because you can say, yeah, that's what, I manage that. And what's also interesting when you compare the two is that with facilities management's definition, the building is the centre point of it. That's the focal point, whereas in this, it's the people. And then any reference to bricks and mortar is simply an example or context. It's kind of just giving you a reference point, but it's focused on a place where people work. Now, people told me it was a new thing. This is the earliest definition of facilities management I can find. I'm still looking. But 1970s, they came up with this. Now, I thought it was interesting. The design and management of workplaces and their impact on the business conducted by the organisations that occupy them. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still a bit clunky in its language. But put simply, we create and operate amazing places to enable people to do amazing work. A simple proposition, and it's something like that we need. And it's kind of been touched on in Fanuda's presentation. We're simply here to create an amazing environment for you to come in and do your best work. And it's getting us towards this saying, I'm a massive fan of Simon Sinek. Again, a bit like Seth Godin, there were some people that are almost cult-like, and I'll confess, I'm in the cult. And some people that are kind of a bit sceptical about his simplicity of these things. But it gets us into this concept of why, and why is really, really crucially important. And we, as an organisation, had to go through this. So basically what the premise is here is that organisations that succeed are the ones that truly understand their why. They don't focus on their how and don't focus on their what. Which is what, in the book, they explore how Apple have been a real success, because if you focus on their what, they didn't really advertise you about the latest MP3 player. That wasn't their tactic. They talk to you about why they exist, and they appeal to you on an emotional level. It's actually, we've just seen from Google, the fact that they've got car manufacturing plants and laboratories and things like that. That's because they're clear on their why. It doesn't dictate how and what they do. The why is the important thing. It means they can flex. And I think there's something in that for professions, because if you don't understand your why, and we've just seen two completely divergent definitions of them, the official versus the public perception, if you like. If we're not clear on our why, then how on earth can we decide on how and what we do? So we did a little bit of a study in there where we looked at, we asked people, what is FM all about? Is it managing the spaces where people work, or is it simply enabling them to do work wherever they need to? Now what we're seeing is that there's still some over in the kind of managing buildings bit, but there is this shift towards an understanding and appreciation that it's about enabling people to work wherever they need to. So we do see that kind of perception is shifting, albeit within ourselves at the moment. Then we looked at this kind of workplace and FM debate. Now, I would exercise caution to this. I think if we went back a year, I probably wouldn't have asked this question, because the reality is it's probably unimportant in terms of the relationship. But it's something that has got some people snagged on. Is FM just part of what is workplace just part of what an FM does? Or is workplace the umbrella? And it kind of gets into not a terribly helpful parent-child type conversation. But what we've got here is more of a split between people saying, well, it's just part of FM, whereas other people say, no, this is the big picture. Now, some people that see that say, well, look, Chris, your organisation jumped the gun a little bit by putting workplace into the title. The reality is, if we'd asked this 5-6 years ago, I think you would have seen much more on this side. This is, the workplace is one separate element of FM. What we're starting to see is this kind of shift towards this idea that the one and the same is all part of this big idea. So, coming back to why on earth I talked to you about jungle fowls and chickens at the very start of this, because the reality is, we are coming from a bias. We are coming from an area of the workplace kind of equation that we are very familiar with. So that physical space bit, that's our red jungle fowl. We've been doing this for a long time, but the reality is, if we're going to take this workplace opportunity, and I do think it is one, if we're going to really move forward and become a new profession, if we're going to go and get those, the recognition and the value get attributed the value that we're searching for, it's not going to be simply by doing this more and shouting more about it. We have to actually change our DNA. And that means looking at culture, that means looking at technology, and we purposely didn't go down the route of FM, HR, IT, albeit we recognise those professional silos. What we're looking at is actually cultural ideas, cultural appreciation. We're looking at the role of technology. So this isn't about building better relationships necessarily just with HR. It's like understanding why culture is important into the workplace equation. And it's only by combining those ideas that we're actually going to be able to take this workplace debate. Otherwise, it will simply be a group of professionals trying to change their name so that they get into certain meetings that they're probably not invited to at the moment. Now, that's where I think the workplace opportunity is. I don't think it's a fad. I don't think it's something that should be taken lightly. We have got torchbearers that have been out for a number of years. Some of them are in the room talking about this. And FM as a profession and us as a professional body representing it being a bit lethargic and realising that. But that's not happening anymore. We've got stacks of work to do about that. And if you want to come and talk to a few of us in lunch, we can tell you a bit more about it. But I kind of want to take it right back to some of the ideas that we've been talking about before, because for every opportunity there's a threat. And we've already touched on the threat, and I want to kind of look at technology. Now, I don't want to be one of these guys that says, we're doomed, AI is going to replace us all. Equally, I don't want to be this sort of rose-tinted, technology is going to be the saviour of humankind. I just kind of want to touch on it from our own perspective as a profession, what it might mean. We did a study. This is, we listed a series of technologies. Although I was talking to a chap from the BBC who works in the tech department. He was like the head of tech. He basically terrified me and told me that I'm going to be killed by a machine in 15 years' time. And that's kind of his opener. And then we worked backwards from that. It was a very tense train journey back from Manchester. But he kind of said to me, why have you got artificial intelligence and machine learning separated? It's essentially the same thing. But we presented all these technologies to FMs, and we said, which of these do you think is going to have a fundamental impact on FM as a profession in the next 10 years? And let's face it, 10 years in technology terms is a lifetime, right? Here's what they said. This is the list of technologies that more than 50% of FMs thought would affect them. Okay? BMS, CAFM, BIM, cloud computing, convinced because they've heard it on an advert. IWMS, Internet of Things, I'm convinced because they heard it at a conference, and People Analytics because they heard this HR word said an awful lot. So these are the only technologies that are going to have an impact on our profession. What's even more hysterical is the list of ones that we got less than 50% agreement with. Big data, wow. Like, literally big data's changing it now, but these guys don't think it's going to change it in 10 years' time. AI, robotics, data mining, virtual assistants, virtual reality, all these things that you've heard today, chatbots. We mentioned chatbots. In the service industry as well, So these things they don't think, and it worried me, and we did ask FMs, I haven't got the slides with me, but we did ask FMs, what future do you think? Do you think we're just going to have a digital upgrade? Do you think we're going to be marginalised? Or, more radical things, do you think we're going to be wiped out or we're going to be reborn? And again, it goes back to my point that I made about the predictions for the Irish rugby school, is that it's very difficult for us to imagine something, A, that we don't want, and B, that we haven't seen for a while, or seen at all in some cases. And so everyone said, no, it's just going to be an upgrade. We're just going to have a few more iPads, right? And I think we all know, realistically, that's not going to be the case. And I kind of want to leave you with this thought. I don't want to scare you, but this idea. So we looked at the profession broke down and kind of some of the more management elements of it. And we did this test. I think it was McKinsey did the test, and someone might know more than me, but McKinsey did a test where we essentially applied a scoring rating to each of the things, each of the sort of areas of work. And they said, how predictable is it? How complex is it? And how reliant is it on a human touch? Now, this is all subjective. This is just us using the model. But what it showed us is that, generally speaking, the kind of management activities are safer from this sort of automation because of the requirement of softer skills in there. And we've sort of touched on the difficulty that we think machines will have with that kind of emotional element. But what I thought was interesting is some things that are very close to FM, as we have it today, traditional FM, procurement, finance, compliance, risk management, estates management, asset management, are all amber. They're close. But it's a very different picture when we then looked at the service lines, and I know we've got a few suppliers in the room that represent and sell these lines. Help desk, cleaning, catering, security, building maintenance, ground maintenance, so on. Much more amber, much more deep orange, much more red. These are the sorts of things that can be automated, and probably already are, and therefore will be. So we have to be cognizant of that. The problem is that with these things happening is that we really struggle to think exponentially, and it's a word that gets thrown around an awful lot, a bit like strategy. And I was I stumbled across this. I was reading a book about digital transformation, funnily enough, building the digital culture, written by a friend of mine. I won't ruin his day and text him, so it's a load of nonsense. But this guy, Chris Martinson, was referenced in it, and he does this sort of talk where he says that humans really struggle with the idea of exponential. We hear it all the time. We could probably define it as, like it grows and then it grows really quick. But here, to demonstrate that, if you've got the room and you haven't got the room, so if you'll put your hands out to one side, don't worry, this is no sort of Messiah complex thing. Although this would be a pretty cool photo if anyone's got a camera. Right, so if you put that, if I asked you then to bring your hands together in the middle, right? So I just want you to bring them nice and slow, meet in the middle. Everyone can cope with that? Everyone happy with that? Well done, you can put your hands down, right? Because we thought in a linear way, we can cope with the speed of it. Now, if I put heavy magnets in your hands and ask you to do the same exercise, your hands would snap shut at random times. You can never predict it. You just be getting here and it just suddenly snap. And it always kind of catch you off guard, because you can't really think it's going to be here when it goes quick, and I know how quick it goes. To give you a practical example by using something completely imaginary, this is the Bernabeu. This is Real Madrid Stadium in Madrid, funny enough. I don't know where I was going with that one. I was just thinking as well, I'm in the stadium, I should probably use this stadium as an example. Who knew, right? But let's imagine we make this watertight, and we're going to run an experiment. We're going to put a tap in the centre circle, right? We're going to turn that tap on, and we're going to see how long it's going to take to fill up the stadium. But here's the rules. So tap's in there, a drop will come out every minute. Each drop will be exponentially bigger. Okay, so the first drop will be 1 drop, then 2, then 4, then 8. So this drop coming out will get exponentially bigger. I'm going to sit you on the very top seat in that stadium, and I'm going to put you in handcuffs. Got a little bit sinister at the end there, didn't it? So I'm going to put you in handcuffs. So, very quickly, because I'm out of time-ish, how long do we think we've got to get out of those handcuffs? Now, can I just stop? You know when you do this with mates, you're like, guess how much this cost me? Like 500 euros, and you're like, no, it wasn't that much. Like let's be sensible. It's not like 3 minutes. Let me give you that. So, what are we talking here?
2 hours.
2 hours? Any advance than 2 hours? 1 hour? 1 hour, right, so we're saying 1 hour. It will take 50 minutes to fill the stadium up, right? So that's quite quick. But here's the thing. It is 97% empty 5 minutes before it's full. So you can sit there for 45 minutes thinking you've got nothing to worry about, and then suddenly you're underwater. That's what exponential means. Don't take my word for it, ask these organisations. Now, I was reliably informed by a sketch artist that everyone uses these examples thinking they're dead and buried. They're not, they're still kicking around. I suspect, though, that their business model was fairly ruined by these guys. They didn't see it coming. So, to sum up, as a profession, we need to decide what our why is about. And I believe it's wrapped up in this workplace idea, as it is. Because if we can get our why right, if we focus on what, on this stuff, then when that changes, what do we become? When that moves, what are we doing? And even some of our how, particularly the bits I highlighted earlier on, if that's our how and these shift, where does that leave us? But if we're stood on the Y disc, if we're stood on that when all the landscape around us changes, and we go back to, and I'm not suggesting this should be it, but a version of this, that says about creating amazing spaces or places for people to do amazing work. How we do that and what that looks like in a new future doesn't really matter, because we just adjust to the new set of criteria, we adjust to the new variables. But if we focus on procurement, if we focus on contract management, if we focus on the bits that we've been focusing on up to today, then when the sort of the tectonic plates shift, we're in danger of being left in a place we don't want to be. So the last thing I'd say to you is, look, we are in a negative feedback loop. We have got an opportunity. But the only way we do it is not by people like me getting up and telling you to. It's by going to your jobs tomorrow and doing something different. You have to be that change. And then I'll put that at the end because I do like how badass this chicken looks like protecting its egg. But that could be us, right? We could be the next version of this profession, which I think is a really exciting time to be around it. Thanks a lot. Cheers.